Welcome to the mbaMission podcast, where every week we discuss different MBA application components and give our expert guidance on everything business school admissions related.
This is Harold Simansky, Senior MBA Admission Consultant here at mbaMission. Joining me today is the founder of our company, Jeremy Shinewald. Hi, Jeremy.
Thanks for having me, Harold. I appreciate you inviting me on the mbaMission podcast.
Of course. Always great to have you here. And one of the reasons is because you've worked with thousands of clients. I've worked with hundreds of clients, but I think the reality is we both bring a tremendous passion to what we do and a love for really the entire process, helping clients. And from my perspective, I love chatting with you about that.
No, I'm happy to chat with you as well. And I know that from working with these clients, it's a calling, right? We feel a deep connection and passion to each client's stories. Absolutely. I know I hear this from your clients all the time, and it's really fulfilling to help someone succeed. But today we're kind of talking about those who
who maybe
did not succeed the first time.
Maybe they didn't get quite the results they wanted to. Maybe they worked on their own, possibly even worked with one of our competitors.
I don't know why they would do that.
Yeah, I know, I'm sort of crazy, isn't it?
Well, we want everyone, but
of course,
that's our
the
quality we're putting.
Listen, I think the reality is we show the quality that we put in. Just check us out on Posts and Quants. Just check it out on some review sites. And at this point, though, it does happen.
Yeah.
And Jeremy, with that in mind, when you have somebody come to you and say, listen, what happened? I didn't get the results I wanted. Are there any specific fatal flaws that you regularly see?
Great question. There are a few things that I'm looking for right off the bat.
Yes.
And, we can go through them for sure.
Yeah.
I guess that's the purpose.
Right? That's
why we're here.
Let's go ahead and do that.
So the first thing that I look for when I'm reviewing a file, assuming that like the applicant truly should be disappointed, like maybe their stats are fine, their work experience is fine. So, and like there isn't something they're just willfully ignoring. Right. We can talk about problems with stats or something like that, but I'd say, assuming the applicant feels like they're a competitive applicant and they put a lot into their file, I feel like the first thing I look for is a personal statement, and I look to see if their goals were realistic.
Okay.
Because
so tell me about that. I've heard words like you have to make sure your goals are both achievable and aspirational. I know that can actually be quite a hard balance to hit.
Right. I always say same type of thing, ambitious but plausible.
Yeah. Okay.
But your nomenclature is fine as well.
Yeah.
And so you as an applicant, like you're going to business school, and the admissions officer is looking and they're saying, hey, what's this person going to do in the future?
Right. Because you are getting an MBA.
Right.
At the end of the day, you're getting an MBA for a reason to do something.
Right. And so they're saying like, we've got a limited number of spaces in this class. We're putting a bet that this individual is going to go out there and, and hopefully set the world on fire in their industry.
Yeah.
They have to believe you can get into that industry.
No question about it.
And so if you say, hey, I was a speechwriter before I went to business school.
Yeah.
Okay. If I say, I'm ready to transition into consulting. Well, consulting is open to all as long as you have certain quantitative skills, right? So if I've got the GMAT to back it up or the GRE, or maybe I've got, I took a whole bunch of econ classes in college. Right. There's something here that says I'm quantitatively talented. That can work, right? If I have no evidence of any quantitative strength and I have a low quantitative GMAT, they're going to look at it and say, Jeremy's an interesting guy. He's a speechwriter. We don't have that many of those in our class, but like I don't know, we can get him into consulting. Like we'd love to have this guy in our class. He's really interesting and fun. And I'm not trying to, speaking generally not about myself. This other Jeremy, the theoretical Jeremy.
I understand.
But they're gonna say, he can't get there. And so it's rarely with consulting that I see this, but I often see it with industries that are really aspirational. People say like, I want to go into hedge funds or VC,
absolutely.
It's a sexy industry.
Of course.
And
I see it frequently.
They can't do it.
I see it frequently with people coming and saying they want to go to venture capital. Listen, I used to be a venture capitalist. I used to actually do some of that. I used to actually work for a private equity firm. And I can tell you right now, very few people leave business school and go do that stuff. They simply don't. So maybe it's such a small percentage of the company. What it frequently shows me, if you say something, I want to go into VC, I want to go into hedge funds, I say, you don't know what they are. That's what I'm sort of thinking most of the time.
And that's our job. Like our job is to kind of hold the mirror up. I was hold the mirror up and say, hey, why do you think this is possible? Like it's not that it's impossible. We're not here to discourage people, but we want to make sure that it's realistic, and maybe it's realistic further down the road. Maybe it is realistic now.
Yes.
I mean, I've certainly helped some people who've gotten to VC, but when I'm reviewing an application, the first thing I'm looking for is those goals to make sure that they're plausible, and even sometimes the reverse. Very rarely the reverse. Like I am. I'm people maybe not being ambitious enough. Like maybe they're, maybe it's realistic for you to be a consultant and go back into consulting, or that's fine actually. But like to be, there's got to be some growth, some purpose in what you're doing and getting an MBA. But you got to be showing that there's like a bridge that you're going to cross.
That's right. And just to sort of interject here, we talk a lot about this with our colleague. Debbie, and Debbie and I are soon going to be doing a podcast specifically on Harvard Business School. And what she'll frequently say is you have to have a real goal that aligns with you going to one of the top business programs in the country. And sort of a very simple example I use is if you're working at a shoe store, don't tell me that you want to go to business school and become the manager of the shoe store.
Right.
That is simply not something that is truly aspirational.
Right.
But to circle back, so
right.
Fatal flaws here.
So I think the goals piece is important, and then I think flowing directly from that goals piece is the why you want to go to that school piece.
Okay.
Because I think that you can nail your goals. Like look, these are plausible and exciting goals. And an admissions committee can get excited about it, and they read it. Pardon me. They read the second part, which is often why our school, and the applicant is saying, I want to go to Wharton because Wharton has a strong reputation in finance, and it's a wonderful school. It's minted many leaders and or created many leaders who've gone on to define our economy. And I appreciate the prestige. And there's nothing specifically there about like, look, here's where I am. I always call this the bridge. Here's where I am. Here's where I want to go with my MBA. And your program is the bridge, right? And so the first example we gave, like VC, that bridge can't be built. Doesn't matter what Wharton offers.
Right.
For a lot of applicants, right?
That
bridge can't be built. And then with others, it's like, okay, I'm saying, here's where I am, here's where I want to go. The bridge can be built, but they're failing to build it. Like it doesn't go far enough. The bridge doesn't stretch, right? So it's like Wharton's a great school, doesn't stretch, but like, what if you're able to identify the major you want to take and how it's going to facilitate your goals, a couple courses that are specific to you, an experiential program, a professor you want to study under, the reason why you want to take a specific study abroad program or whatever. You're starting, you want to basically be creating a plan and showing them like, I've done my homework. I know how I fit in here and how the school can facilitate my goals.
Yeah. I mean, listen, for many people, they think their homework is just really thinking about schools in a very cliche way.
Mm-hmm.
Wharton does a lot more than finance. MIT is not filled with engineers.
Right.
Turns out Kellogg doesn't do a lot of brand marketing. Not a lot of Kellogg students go to brand marketing. So when all said and done, they have to at least, applicants have to at least dig down and figure out not what that stereotype is about a school, but what is actually happening there.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point. You're not just creating a list of courses. It's what's actually happening there. So like you can talk about how, like I said, you got your major and your courses, and like it can't be a list. It's got to be a well-reasoned plan. But then you can also talk about what's happening. Like when I was on your campus, I sat in. I was fortunate that I got to sit in a study group and afterwards, attend the weekly pub session with your team, whatever it is. Yeah. And like, I got a sense of like, you're able to say, hey, I experienced the school. I didn't just, I'm not just listing courses. I experienced the school.
Absolutely.
That's critical.
And what's interesting is a lot of the ways, and very parenthetical here, you can actually experience a school in a lot of different ways. We always think about going for a school visit, but many of these schools have a lot of webinars about things that have nothing to do with admissions. MIT has a lot of webinars on sustainability. Chicago Booth has a lot of webinars on blockchain. And the reality is by doing a webinar, even again, it's not explicitly through the admissions committee, it will greatly impact the story you can tell a school.
Right.
But that's my commercial.
Right. No, I think you're right because the goal is when you're writing this personal statement or interviewing with the school, the goal is for it to become not something that you're trying to like go back at your memory and say, oh, what were the 5 courses? I've got to list them. But that you're familiar enough about it that you're able to speak about it naturally because it actually is your plan.
Jeremy, what we're already seeing is some fatal flaws around the fact your goals are not particularly well articulated. There's not that great mix of achievable and aspirational. Also, school specificity is just not there. You can replace the name in one school and slide in another school, and there's no difference there. Mm-hmm. And what are some of the other things?
So I think some of the things are a little more obvious. I think often applicants come to us with a level of self-awareness. Like, look, I know my GPA, was a problem.
Yeah.
I know my GMAT was a problem. My GRE was a problem. So there are aspects of your candidacy that are harder to overcome. Yes. But we can say, hey, did you have a plan for mitigating that weakness? Okay. So let's say you had you took the GRE, you had a low quant score. Did you just leave it at that, or did you take a supplemental course or two in statistics and economics to say, look, my coursework is a little low, but trust me. Right. I mean, my GRE score is a little low, but trust me. I earned a couple of A's in economic stats and calculus. I can manage the coursework. Or did you take
That's right.
HBS core?
I was going to say, an online course. There's MBA math.
Yeah.
There's also a number of other online courses, math for management, and there are things you can do, and it works for a couple of different reasons. First of all, it works because it's giving you some foundational knowledge you may not have, as well as it's showing business schools, hey, you know what? I recognize what my problem is, and here's what I'm doing to correct it.
Yeah, exactly. It's showing that you're not just kind of taking it.
Yeah.
So I think that's certainly another thing. I mean, I do look for other just macro issues like, were you sloppy or were you inattentive?
Yes.
I think that's important. But I think another big area where I see applicants just miss is their short answers, where it's like, okay, you had all these opportunities to market yourself. And when the school asked you about, your professional background, and they said, what's your major accomplishment? Or what are your responsibilities? My responsibilities are managing mbaMission. It's like, that doesn't tell me anything I don't already know. Right. I've got to express especially if you come from an overrepresented background, every line of your application really, really counts. So look at everything you're telling them as an opportunity to broaden your message. And so
that makes sense, and show your impact. At the end, they show your impact and use, whether it's short answers or honestly, Jeremy, what I am frequently, I don't want to say surprised about, but where I see a fatal flaw very frequently is the resume.
Yeah.
People simply have taken that resume that they used for their last job, maybe touched it up a little bit, and then they send it to business schools. And in actual fact, a work resume and a business school resume are fundamentally different things. We're going to be covering resumes in great, great detail in one of our future podcasts. But
stay tuned.
Stay tuned. But at this point, resumes are certainly one of the fatal flaws you could be seeing here.
Yeah, I mean, I think people, they got a whole bunch of some dead wood on that resume, and the weight is off, and they're not kind of saying like, hey, here's the here and now snapshot of my life.
Yes.
And so definitely, I'll go through it. Another big mistake people make on resumes, I don't want to scoop the whole resume,
right.
But you see, writing resumes is an art, and so you see a lot of people who will just offer their responsibilities, similar to my example before, where they'll say responsible for managing the MbaMission team, responsible for managing budgets, and it's like you want to show that you've been excellent at what you've done. You want to show that you are, that there's a very clear action and a very clear result flowing from that action, and so. And then you see just resumes that are 5 lines of bullets, 5 line long bullets and stuff like that.
Of course.
So there are things you shouldn't do. But I think resumes can be an issue, and then also I'm sure at times when you have recommendations available to us,
they can be a black hole at times.
They can be a black hole, but if they're available, I think. Looking at them and saying your recommender might not have realized this, but they didn't do enough to kind of set you apart. They didn't do enough to, they didn't know how to write a letter of recommendation properly. And so
absolutely.
They weren't being malevolent. They just didn't know what to do.
In fact, Jeremy, I'm going to say one of our biggest value adds is I will go and speak to the recommenders frequently.
Yeah.
My client puts me in touch with them. I never tell them what they should write. I simply explain to them, listen, you are a very, very important piece of this process.
Mm-hmm.
This person is asking you to champion them. You have to show them in the light in which they deserve, because they're up against a very competitive group of people.
And that doesn't mean being blustery about it. It just means like you don't want a recommender to be like, Harold is the single greatest person I've ever met.
Exactly.
You will never meet another person like Harold.
Exactly.
And like just continue to offer these kind of platitudes.
Yeah.
But you've got to be able to like dig in and say, having worked with 35 investment banking analysts over the last whatever X years, Harold stands out for the following 3 reasons, and then back them up with examples.
Absolutely.
And that's key.
Specificity is going to be really, really key here.
So it's not like they'll ding you because your recommender isn't on point, but it's more like it's a missed opportunity to differentiate you from others.
That makes sense. And the reality is one of the fatal flaws certainly is, and we do see this, is when did you ask your recommender to write the recommendation?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're applying in September and you ask them in August and they're going on vacation, and the reality is that it wasn't really fair to them, in turn it wasn't really fair to you.
Right.
Right.
That's a great point. I like that.
Yeah.
Not fair to them, not fair to you.
No.
Good.
Of course. And listen, recommenders are just so important.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I do think there are probably, 1 or 2 other things I can think of that are fatal. I mean, one is just like sometimes applicants are just applying to the wrong schools.
Yeah. 100%. I was just going to say the same thing.
Either poor fits and they're able to just not able to express that fit well because it's not the right place for them. But more often, like sometimes your application process didn't match your risk profile. So
no, I think that's right. And people
I only applied to Harvard and Stanford. Why didn't I get in? It's like, well,
great people don't get into both those schools. Great people don't. And I'll tell you, Jeremy, what is, I don't want to say frustrating, but what people should keep in mind, it's not unusual you apply to some great schools. You go into this process thinking to yourself, if I apply to Harvard or Stanford, it's fine if I don't get in. The reality is I know how tough it is.
That's okay.
That's fine.
If that's sorry,
exactly.
No.
By all means,
that's fine if you understand that you may not be successful.
Exactly right. But keep in mind that is the decision that you've made.
But if you're like saying, I must go to business school next year, that's not a good strategy for you. Or if you're saying like, I have a really low GMAT score and I'm working on improving it, like it might not work out, and you're applying only to the 5 schools, the highest GMAT score, then you might need a reality check. Like, and it's again, like I say, often we get those big reviews, and there's like just raw data that's just off. Often applicants will say like, okay, I know, but like sometimes applicants won't know because they're from very, very competitive pools, and they'll say, well, like I have a 710 GMAT score, speaking an old GMAT language now, and I got promoted at XYZ consulting firm, and I went to a good school, and it's like, that's true, but your GMAT score is actually a little lower than the average. And there are a lot of people applying from your pool.
That's another thing that we do see, and that's another thing we do see regularly. It's frequently people come to us and they may have been rejected. But sort of the corollary to that is, but my friend who went to college with me, who has the same resume as I do, got accepted.
Right.
And first of all, that's hard to argue with because there certainly are pieces of the process that no one really controls. But another point is, at the end of the day, no one really knows what's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
You simply don't know. You simply don't know what that recommender said versus what
you're. Or like I saw someone online who had this profile that didn't even lower score than me, and they got it. It's like we don't know. Like we don't know what's going on. That's a fatal flaw. Is presuming knowledge.
Right. It's true.
Presuming that you understand. Like, yes, that person. Like whenever someone says that to me, I just ask them like 2 or 3 questions. I'm like, that person is very different from you.
Yes.
That person's a different gender. They had different circumstances growing up. Different nationality.
Absolutely.
What you're saying is, I'm aware of this person's GMAT score, where they went to school, and where they worked.
Yes.
And that's it.
And that's only such a small piece of your entire profile.
Yeah.
And I think that's also one of the fatal flaws is you haven't really recognized how the different pieces of the application itself fit together.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, short answers, recommendations, resume, essays, they all really have to be painting a single story of who you are. And that story has to be one that speaks to that particular school.
I would say there's also one other fatal flaw that I can think of in terms of execution. And I'm sure there are other, like, everyone has their own conceptions of fatal flaws, but I would say, that, rarely, but sometimes you just see applicants who are trying too hard to impress.
Yes.
And they're sort of stretching and bragging, and they don't even know they're doing it because they think that they've got to put their best out there.
Yes.
They're like, and if you have facts, that's fine. Like, if you're able to say, look, I was the first person in my group to earn a promotion, you can explain why.
Yes.
But it's like, I remember an applicant that a colleague of ours had a couple of years ago, and this person couldn't stop saying, like, I'm in like an intellectuals roundtable with 65-year-olds, and and it was just like, it was just too much.
Yes.
And we kept saying, like, just tone it down. It's okay. It's okay to explain it, but it doesn't have to be everywhere.
Absolutely.
It comes across as sort of like, would you want that person in your class?
That's another thing.
Business schools, your learning team.
Yeah, business schools are creating communities. They certainly can get a vibe from people of, do they want to have this type of student? Do they expect this student will succeed? Candidly, is this student going to be a great team member? Are other folks in his school, is he going to be somebody that they want to have on their team?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes applications will tell you, for maybe some sort of subjective reasons, hey, the answer might be no.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to spend more time with this person.
Yeah, and I mean, then there are flaws that maybe you're not aware of. Like, maybe you didn't see your recommender. Maybe your recommender, this is rare, but maybe your recommender did say something that wasn't great. Maybe you thought you interviewed really well and you didn't.
That's another thing. That can be very hard, I think, for a lot of people, where they get an actual interview, and at that point they maybe even believe they did a good job at their interview and they don't get in. And that can sometimes be a hard conversation. What I will frequently remind people, for most schools, an interview is just one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. I mean, for most schools, it's a piece, and they go back and they kind of consider it with the entire application. It's an important piece, but it's not like if you have a lot of ums and ahs that you don't get into school. Yeah. It's more like and even if you're nervous at times, that can be okay. Like, it can be charming if you're nervous.
Yes.
But like, are you able to articulate those key points we made? Like, are you able to be an advocate of yourself and highlight your best? Are you able to explain why you fit in with the school?
Yeah, absolutely.
The story has to come out. We see people who interview in all sorts of different ways. The people who really fail are those who are robotic, right? Those who are like
overprogrammed.
Yeah, they like just come across like, like they're reciting from memory, and they are not there in the spontaneous moment. And like, it's a weird experience. If you've ever had someone doing that, you feel like you're talking to someone who is programmed. It doesn't work.
Of course. Listen, business school classrooms are very active. People are really have to speak, as they think and speak. And the reality is if you can't do that in an interview, which is a very safe space, how are you going to actually do it in the classroom?
Yeah. I would say one other fatal flaw that I can think of. It's just a like kind of an obvious hole in your application. Like, okay, I've looked at your profile. You executed really well. I can't critique your resume. I'm sure I could nitpick, but you didn't engage in any leadership. There's no leadership here. There's no community service. There's no leadership at work. There's no personal leadership. We heard 4 work stories.
That's right.
There's just a missing depth in your profile that you can mitigate that. I mean, you can't do it in a superficial way, but you can mitigate that over time.
And listen, certainly one way to mitigate it is to apply to a lot of schools. Sure, you may have your heart set on Harvard, Stanford, and both Jeremy and I have seen all sorts of people get into Harvard and Stanford, but the reality is there's many other great schools.
Many successful.
Jeremy and I each went to some of those other great schools.
Yeah.
So
you can get where you need to go, without going to Harvard and Stanford. I would say there are, no one is looking at someone who's 10 years deep into their career and saying like, well, you went to Stanford, just sit there and collect a paycheck.
Exactly.
Or even saying to the individual, like, hey, I need you to run this important project. Remind me, which school did you go to again? Yeah, no one cares. It's like, after your first job, it's really about like, what have you done for me?
Yeah, absolutely. Or something's gone wrong in your career if the only thing you can point to after 10 years is, hey, I went to Harvard, I went to Stanford, I went to wherever.
Yeah.
So, Jeremy, just as we wrap up here, I'm going to do a little bit of a commercial. fully recognizing people have a lot of questions, particularly if they've been rejected, particularly about their own individual profile. I always tell folks, listen, sign up with us for 30 minutes for a 30-minute consult, absolutely free. It is not a sales call. We are truly interested in having a conversation with you. And I think we can be really 30 minutes allows us to get to know you a little bit more, as well as to have some good insights on maybe what went right and maybe what went wrong.
Yeah, and if you're enjoying this session with Harold, we both open up free consultation slots every week, as do all of our colleagues. And if you don't like me and Harold, well, we've got we've got 23 other options for you. So yeah, it's very, very valuable. It's not a sales pitch. We're there to help give people good free information. So
that's right, because we love what we do.
Yeah,
at the end of the day, we love talking to people. We love helping people sort of in this important stage in their life. And if you want to try us out in different ways, by all means, go into mbaMission.com. We have videos, we have podcasts, we have insider guides, we have interview guides, and we just rolled out something called mbaMission onTrack. Jeremy, just tell us a little bit about what onTrack is.
Yeah, I mean, onTrack. Thanks, Harold. onTrack is well, first of all, Poets and Quants called it. I believe their words were the most comprehensive admissions resource, MBA admissions resource ever created. And so I took a lot of pride in that because that's objective feedback. It is an admissions platform that actually customizes itself to the applicant.
Yes.
So the applicant, if you have a low GMAT, you're going to get a module on low GMATs. If you want to go to Harvard, Stanford, and MIT, you're going to get Harvard, Stanford, and MIT modules. You're not going to get the Kellogg and Chicago module unless you want those. If you're trying to apply as a consultant, you'll get applying as a consultant. And you answer a questionnaire, and the entire and onTrack adapts itself to you, gives you the curriculum that you need, and then it's a guided process. I'm your guide, and there are lessons through all of the critical aspects, from long-term planning to brainstorming and the execution pieces like essays and personal statements and interviews. We even have an interview platform where you can record yourself and
which is hard to do, which is actually very, very hard to do for most people.
Yeah, you can record yourself, watch your responses, your served up questions. I mean, there's so much in it, and then there are school modules where you can learn about the school in a really dynamic way, learn about their curriculum, learn about like why you'd want to go to the school, why you wouldn't want to go to the school, their curriculum, the career prospects, and then special topics, and then you can get into execution. MIT. This is how you execute on their essays. This is how you execute on their short answers, on their interview, etc. We even go all the way to like you've gotten in, great. Let's talk about your scholarship, or let's talk about your what to do on the way to business school. It is so comprehensive. I love it, and it just rolled out. Yeah,
it just rolled out. Already, we're getting great
feedback.
People love it. But again, this is just one of the many services we offer here at MbaMission.
You cut me off because I was going on too much because I'm so enamored. But one thing I do want to say, sorry, is that it's not just like videos, but it's interactive. So they're like exercises and checklists, and
there we go.
It's like we guide you. Okay, now it's time to like move back into your MIT essays. You've got let's grab your brainstorming from before as you think about your MIT essays. Now we've talked about your MIT essays. Now use these stories to write. Like it's so specific. So I get carried away because it's so vastly hard to explain.
No, honestly, Jeremy is the one who takes you through this entire process. And the reality is it's incredibly comprehensive. We also have other services that are more comprehensive, and that would include our start to finish package, where we hold your hand throughout the entire process. You'd work with me, you'd work with Jeremy, you'd work with one of our 23 other consultants.
And you get onTrack as part of that because it's a tool in your process.
Yeah, I mean, that's really important.
So it's free, and there's no additional cost for onTrack if you're working with a consultant like Harold, so you get the best of both worlds. Harold would be your guide.
That's right.
He would work with you through every step of that process, painstakingly, with a lot of passion that Harold has, and he'd be able to leverage onTrack where he needs and say, you might want to just check out this lesson here.
Practice
very I always say like a scalpel. When you've got a consultant, onTrack becomes a tool as opposed to a scalpel, not a hammer.
I tell folks, go off and practice your interview.
Yeah,
we have this wonderful video platform, and it is really a great help.
Yeah.
But with that in mind,
thanks for doing this,
Jeremy. By all means, it's great having you here today. We're doing other podcasts, some with Jeremy, some with some of my other colleagues. And when all's said and done, come visit us, talk to us, take a look at some of our resources. And we think at the end of the day, we can help you do a better application
Yeah,
and all set.
absolutely. That's our job is to be your mentor, your coach, your guide to put together your best application
and avoid these fatal flaws if we can. Okay. Jeremy, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Fantastic.
Thanks for listening to the mbaMission podcast. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcasts so you don't miss an episode. We wish you the best of luck with your MBA applications and look forward to helping you on your journey to business school.